The peaceful Volani Republic was dying. Their beautiful blue worlds, covered in vast oceans and floating crystal cities, were being torn apart one by one. The Krex Empire had come like a plague from the Outer Rim, their massive black warships. Appearing in system after system, they didn't negotiate. They didn't offer surrender terms. They simply arrived, harvested what they wanted, and left behind empty husks of worlds. Commander Giwan floated in the command center of the last Volani defense station, his tentacles trembling as he watched another transport ship burst into flames. The crystalline hull that had protected his people for thousands of years meant nothing against Krex plasma weapons. Families, children, entire communities were dying while he could do nothing but watch. "Dad, send the message," Giwan whispered too. His communications officer broadcasted on all frequencies. "Someone in this galaxy must help us." The distress signal traveled through hyperspace, bouncing between relay stations and communication networks. Most species who received it simply deleted the message. Everyone knew about the Krex Empire. Everyone knew that fighting them meant death. The smart thing was to stay quiet and hope they never came to your system. But there was one planet that didn't delete the message, deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. In a command center that had survived nuclear wars and global catastrophes, Admiral Minho sat in his chair reading the translation. The alien words were strange, but the desperation was clear. An entire civilization was crying out for help, and nobody was answering. "Sir," his aide said quietly, "the politicians are still debating whether we should get involved. They're worried about starting a war with an advanced alien empire." Minho looked at the tactical display showing Krex fleet movements. These aliens had conquered 47 star systems without breaking a sweat. Their technology was centuries ahead of anything humans had. By every logical measure, getting involved would be suicide. But as Minho read the desperate words of Commander Giwan, he thought about something the politicians didn't understand. Earth wasn't just any planet. It was a world that had tried to kill humanity every single day for millions of years. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, diseases, predators, natural disasters. Earth had thrown everything at humans, and they had survived it all. The Krex Empire was used to fighting civilized species. Peaceful aliens who lived on gentle worlds with mild weather and abundant resources. They had never faced creatures forged by a planet that considered survival an hourly challenge. Minho pulled up files on human military history. Battles where humans had fought impossible odds and won through sheer stubbornness. Survival stories where people had lived through conditions that would kill most aliens instantly. The Krex thought they were dealing with just another soft target. Were about to learn how wrong they were. The Admiral reached for his communication device. While politicians argued about the wisdom of intervention, human warships were already moving toward the Outer Rim. Earth's children were coming to answer the call for help, and they were bringing with them all the fury of a species that earned its place in the galaxy through blood and fire. The Krex Empire had never encountered resistance from a death. World's children. They were about to get an education in human warfare. The stars shifted and twisted as the UES Retribution tore through hyperspace, its hull groaning under the stress of faster-than-light travel. Captain Huna gripped her command chair as the ship dropped back into normal space, the familiar blue glow of the Volani system filling the viewscreen. This was humanity's first official contact with an alien civilization, and they were walking into a war zone. "Incoming transmission," reported Communications Officer Kyung. "It's from the Volani flagship. They're requesting permission to come aboard." Huna nodded. "Tell them we'll meet them in Docking Bay 3 in Kung. Make sure our translators are working perfectly. We can't afford any misunderstandings." A word later, Huna stood in the docking bay, watching the strangest sight she'd ever seen. The Volani shuttle was beautiful, made of what looked like living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. When the airlock opened, the aliens that emerged were unlike anything in human imagination. Elder Siphon moved like he was swimming through air, his graceful tentacles flowing around him in patterns that seemed almost like a dance. His skin was translucent, showing the slow pulse of alien blood beneath. Behind him came other Villani, all moving with the same fluid grace, their large eyes reflecting the ship's lights like mirrors. Ambassador Taiyun stepped forward, his diplomatic training kicking in despite the surreal situation. Elder Siphon, I'm Ambassador Taiyun of the United Earth Government. We received your distress call and came as quickly as possible. The Villani leader's translator crackled to life, turning his musical sounds into words humans could understand. You actually came. When we sent the message, we hoped, but we never truly believed anyone would answer. Your message reached Earth, Taeyon replied. He couldn't ignore a civilization facing extinction. Elder Siphon's tentacles quivered, and his translator struggled to convey his emotion. Da 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 da. But you don't understand. We researched your species after receiving your reply. Your homeworld is classified as a Class 12 Death World, the most dangerous category in galactic records. How do your people even survive on such a planet? Captain Huna couldn't help but smile. We're stubborn. Earth tried to kill us with ice. Ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, plagues, predators, and natural disasters. We just refused to die. The Villani delegation exchanged what looked like nervous glances. Elder Siphon's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Your species survived planetary extinction events. Multiple times. The Kreks have been conquering systems for centuries, but they've never faced creatures like you. Taiyun leaned forward, his diplomatic mask slipping to reveal genuine curiosity. Tell us about the Kreks. What are we dealing with? Elder Siphon's tentacles drooped with despair. They are efficiency incarnate. Their technology is centuries beyond ours. They arrive, demand surrender, and when we refuse, they simply overwhelm us with superior firepower. We are a peaceful people, Ambassador. We have never known true warfare. How many worlds have you lost? Huna asked. 3 of our 7 colonies have fallen. The populations were either enslaved or eliminated. We cannot match their military might, and our pacifist nature makes us ineffective in combat. Every battle we fight ends in retreat or annihilation. The human delegation absorbed this information in silence. Finally, Taeyon spoke. Elder Siphon, what do you know about human military history? The Villani leader consulted a device that looked like living coral. Our databases show your species has been in a state of constant warfare for your entire recorded history. You fight each other, your environment, and any threat you encounter. This is ... unusual among galactic civilizations. Huna stepped forward. What the Kreks don't understand is that for humans, war isn't something we do. It's something we are. We've been fighting for survival since we learned to walk upright. Earth made us into weapons, then taught us to use those weapons to protect others. Elder Siphon's entire body shimmered with what the translator interpreted as hope. You truly believe you can stop them? We don't just believe it, Huna replied. We're going to prove it. The underground intelligence facility beneath Seoul hummed with activity as screens flickered with alien data streams. Intelligence Officer Seojin sat surrounded by holographic displays showing Kreks battle formations, communication patterns, and tactical analysis. He'd been studying the enemy for 72 hours straight, surviving on nothing but coffee and determination. Colonel Min-jae, you need to see this, Seojin called out, highlighting a section of intercepted Kreks communications. I've been analyzing. They're battle records from the past 50 years, and there's a pattern here that's almost too obvious. Colonel Min-jae walked over, her boots echoing in the sterile chamber. She was a veteran of 3 major conflicts, and her scarred hands told. Stories of battles fought in places most people couldn't even pronounce. What did you find? Seojin pulled up a 3-dimensional map showing Kreks' conquest routes. Look at this. 47 star systems conquered in the past century. Every single engagement follows the same pattern. They arrive with overwhelming force, demand surrender, and when the aliens refuse, they demonstrate their superior firepower with a single devastating attack. And then the aliens surrender. Every single time. The longest resistance they've ever faced was 6 hours. Most species give up after seeing what Krek's weapons can do. Seojin switched to another display showing casualty reports. Their average losses per system, less than 1%. They've been fighting a galaxy full of civilizations that value survival over victory. Min-jae studied the data with growing interest. They've never had to adapt their tactics because they've never needed to. They're used to fighting rational enemies who calculate odds and make logical decisions about survival. Exactly. But look at this. Seojin brought up psychological profiles of conquered species. Every civilization they've defeated shares common traits. They're peaceful, logical, and they understand that fighting a superior force is futile. They make the smart choice to surrender and preserve their populations.
Oh.
Min-jae laughed, a sound that held no humor. They have no idea what they're dealing with, do they? None whatsoever. I've been cross-referencing their records with human military history. Colonel, they've never fought a species that actually gets more dangerous when cornered. They've never faced an enemy that sees impossible odds as a challenge rather than a death sentence. Meanwhile, thousands of light-years away, Supreme Commander Vorthok stood in his command chamber aboard the flagship Dominator. Massive vessel drifted through space like a predator stalking prey, its hull black as the void itself. Vorthok's forearms gestured dismissively as he reviewed reports about the new species. Primitive mammals from a backwater system, he growled to his aide. They call themselves humans. Their technology is centuries behind ours, and they claim to represent something called Earth. His aide, a nervous creature with too many eyes, consulted a datapad. Sir, our scouts report that their homeworld is classified as a Class 1-2. Deathworld, the most dangerous category in galactic records. Vorthok's laugh was like grinding metal, irrelevant. We've conquered species with advanced technology, powerful weapons, and sophisticated defenses. These mammals have crude chemical rockets and primitive energy weapons. Your planet's classification means nothing against our superiority. But sir, the intelligence reports show they've been in constant warfare for their entire recorded history. They fight each other, their environment, and silence. Vorthok's voice echoed through the command chamber. We have conquered 47 star systems without significant casualties. We have perfected the art of warfare through technological superiority and strategic brilliance. These humans will fall just as easily as all the others. Back on Earth, Seojin finished his analysis and turned to Colonel Min-jae. They're going to approach this like every other conquest. Overwhelming force, demand surrender, then shock, and, well, when we refuse. Min-jae smiled, and this time there was something predatory in her expression. Let them come with their standard tactics. They're about to learn that humans don't surrender. We adapt, we improvise, and we never, ever give up. The war room beneath Geneva felt like the heart of a sleeping giant. Dozens of military officers from every nation sat around a massive holographic table, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of star charts and tactical displays. Admiral Minho stood at the center, his weathered hands resting on the table as he prepared to reveal humanity's answer to the Krek's threat. Ladies and gentlemen, Minho began, his voice carrying the weight of command. We face an enemy with technology, centuries beyond our own. They have weapons that can crack planets and shields that laugh at our best missiles. If we try to match them ship for ship, weapon for weapon, we will lose. The room fell silent. General Hannah from the Korean Space Command leaned forward. Then what do you propose, Admiral? Minho smiled, and there was something almost feral in his expression. We don't fight their war. We fight our war. We use what Earth gave us, what no other species in the galaxy has. He gestured to Lieutenant Commander Sora, who activated a new display showing psychological profiles of various galactic species. Commander Sora has been studying the behavioral patterns of every species the Kreks have conquered. Tell them what you found. Sora stood, her voice clear and confident. Every species they've defeated follows the same pattern when faced with superior force. They calculate odds, assess survival chances, and make logical decisions about surrender. It's rational. Behavior for civilized beings and humans? Asked Colonel Junho from the back of the room. Humans are the only known species that actually becomes more dangerous when cornered. Every other race in the galaxy sees impossible odds as a reason to surrender. We see them as a challenge to overcome. Sora switched to a display showing human military history. When facing extinction, humans don't calculate survival odds. They calculate how much damage they can do before they go down. Admiral Minho stepped forward again. This is the foundation of what we're calling the Death World Doctrine. We don't try to match Krek's technology. We use our evolutionary advantages: adaptability, aggression, and an absolute refusal to stay down when knocked out. The tactical display shifted to show fleet movements. Our first battle group is already preparing to enter Villani space, but they won't be flying in formation. Like a proper navy, they'll be disguised as merchant vessels, moving in small groups, using tactics that no civilized species would consider. Captain Huna's voice crackled through the communication system from orbit. Admiral, the Retribution Group is ready for deployment. We've modified our ships to look like trading vessels, but we're carrying enough firepower to level a small moon. Could brief your pilots on the new engagement protocols. High above Earth, in the docking bay of the UES Retribution, Captain Huna stood before a group of humanity's best pilots. These men and women had been selected not just for their skills, but for their ability to think outside the box when everything went wrong. They were the kind of people who saw a hopeless situation and immediately started planning how to turn it into an advantage. "Listen up," Huna said, her voice echoing in the hangar. "Forget everything you learned about proper space combat. Forget formations. Forget rules of engagement. Forget the concept of honorable warfare. The Kreks expect us to fight like civilized beings. They expect us to follow their rules." She gestured to the modified fighters around them. "These ships have been stripped of everything non-essential and loaded with as much firepower as we can cram into them. We're not going to dance around in neat formations. We're going to hit them like a swarm of angry hornets." "What?" Dong Yun raised his hand. "What about survival protocols?" Yuna's smile was sharp as a blade. "We don't retreat. We don't surrender. If your ship is damaged beyond repair, you ram it into the nearest Krek's vessel. If you're outnumbered 10 to 1, you take as many of them with you as possible. Fight like what we are, survivors from a world that tried to kill us every single day for millions of years." The pilots exchanged glances, and something passed between them. It was the look of hunters recognizing their prey, of predators preparing to show the galaxy what Earth's children could do when their families were threatened. "We don't fight like civilized species," Huna continued. "We fight like what we are, Deathworlders, who earned our place in the galaxy through blood and fire. The Kreks are about to learn why Earth is classified as the most dangerous planet in known space. The Krek's assault fleet moved through space like a mechanical symphony of destruction. 47 massive warships arranged in perfect formation, their black hulls gleaming under the light of distant stars. Commander Vorthak stood in his command center, watching the beautiful blue world of Aquanus grow larger on the main screen. This would be conquest number 48, and like all the others, it would be over within hours. "Sir, we're detecting some unusual readings near the fourth moon," reported his sensor operator. There appear to be several merchant vessels in the area." Vorthak barely glanced at the tactical display. "It's probably refugees trying to escape. Ignore them unless they interfere with our operations." The Krek's fleet maintained its stately approach, weapons charging with the familiar hum of overwhelming power. This was how civilized warfare worked. Show your strength, demand surrender, and when they refused, demonstrate why resistance was futile. The pattern had worked for a century of conquests, but as the fleet entered the inner system, something went wrong. The merchant vessels near the fourth moon suddenly accelerated at impossible speeds. Their engines burning so hot they should have melted their own ships. These weren't fleeing refugees, they were predators that had been lying in wait. All ships. "This is Captain Huna of the Human Defense Force. Came a transmission on all frequencies." "You picked the wrong species, too. Mess with. Let's show them what Earth's children can do." The first wave of human fighters screamed toward the Krek's fleet, Kate, and immediately, Vorthak knew he was facing something completely new. These ships didn't maintain formation. They didn't follow attack patterns. They moved like a swarm of angry insects, each pilot making split-second decisions that no tactical computer could predict. "What are they doing?" demanded Vorthak as he watched human fighters perform maneuvers that should have killed their pilots from excessive gravitational forces. Pilot. Dong Yun's fighter had taken a direct hit from a Krek's plasma cannon, its hull cracked in atmosphere. Venting into space, any civilized pilot would have ejected or retreated. Instead, Dong Yun's voice crackled over the communication channels, filled with what sounded like genuine laughter. "Hey, ugly, you want to play rough? Let's play rough." Damaged fighter suddenly accelerated directly toward a Krek's destroyer, its engines pushed beyond safe limits. The Krek's crew watched in shock as the small human vessels slammed into their ship's hull, both vessels disappearing in a brilliant explosion that lit up the surrounding space. Did he just did that pilot just sacrifice himself for a single kill? Whispered the Krek sensor operator. Before Vorthak could respond, more human fighters were following the same suicidal pattern. But it wasn't suicide. It was calculated fury. Each ramming attack took out ships 10 times larger than the human. Vessels and the pilots seemed to be competing to see who could cause the most damage. "These creatures are insane," Vorthak muttered, but his voice carried a note of growing fear. "They're not fighting to win. They're fighting to hurt us as much as possible." Lieutenant Commander Sora's voice echoed across the battlefield as her squadron dove between two Krek's heavy cruisers. "Remember, people, we're not here to be heroes. We're here to be nightmares. Make every shot count, and if you're going down, take a few of them with you." The human fighters moved with a fluid adaptability that made no sense. When their weapons failed, they used their ships as missiles. When outnumbered, they didn't retreat. They split up and attacked from all directions simultaneously. They fought like creatures that had evolved on a world. Every day was a struggle for survival. Vorthak watched his tactical display with growing horror as ship after ship disappeared from his fleet. The humans had lost maybe a dozen fighters, but they destroyed or crippled over 15 major warships. The mathematics of warfare had somehow been turned upside down. "Sir, we're receiving casualty reports from all sectors," his aide reported, voice shaking. "The humans are using tactics we've never encountered. They're not trying to preserve their forces. They're trying to maximize damage to ours." The battle raged for 3 hours, but it felt like an eternity. When the human ships finally pulled back, Vorthak stared at the remains of his once mighty fleet. A third of his ships were gone, reduced to floating debris and emergency beacons. The survivors were traumatized, their crews reporting nightmares about human pilots who laughed as they died. "Retreat," Vorthak ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Signal the High Command. Tell them we've encountered something new, something that doesn't fight like any civilized species should." As the Krek's fleet limped away from Aquinas, the human pilots regrouped around their command ship. They'd lost friends, but they'd proven something important. Earth's children didn't fight to win battles. They fought to win wars no matter the cost. The news of humanity's victory at Aquinas spread through the galaxy like wildfire. In the depths of space, on trading stations and colony worlds, beings who had never heard of Earth suddenly found themselves whispering about the species. That had made the mighty Krek's empire retreat. But it was in the shadowy corners of Krek's military bases where the real impact was felt. Communications Officer Yunji sat in her cramped workspace aboard the UES Retribution, surrounded by screens showing intercepted Krek's communications. She'd been a propaganda specialist before the war, helping to shape public opinion during Earth's various conflicts. Now she was about to wage a different kind of battle, one that would take place inside the minds of the enemy. "Captain Huna, I've got something that might interest you," Yunji called out as she finished uploading a new data package. "I've been monitoring Krek's military channels, and their troops are asking questions about us. They want to know what kind of species they're really fighting." Huna looked over her shoulder at the transmission logs. "What kind of questions?" "They're trying to understand how we survived on a Class 12 death world. They know the classification, but they don't really understand what that means for us as a species." Youngji pulled up a compilation of footage she'd been preparing. "I think it's time we showed them." The first broadcast began with simple historical footage, medieval knights charging into battle, samurai facing impossible odds, ancient warriors defending their homes against overwhelming forces. But Yoonji had been clever about her selections. These weren't just random battles. They were moments when humans had faced extinction and chosen to fight anyway. Then came the survival documentaries. Humans living in the frozen Arctic, thriving in burning deserts, adapting to environments that would kill most aliens within hours. The footage showed humans not just surviving these conditions, but actually choosing to live in them for sport and challenge. But the final segment was what truly broke the Krek's psyche. Yoonji had compiled recordings of Earth's apex predators, great white sharks, tigers, grizzly bears, and humans hunting all of them. The footage showed humans not fleeing from these monsters, but actively seeking them out, studying them, and in some cases, keeping them as companions. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. On the Krek's forward base at Kepler Station, Trooper Viktor had been a veteran of 20 campaigns. He'd seen species surrender after a single demonstration of Krek's power. He'd watched entire civilizations lay down their arms rather than face the Empire's might. But now, staring at the human footage on his personal viewer, something fundamental had changed in his understanding of warfare. They hunt the predators on their own world, he whispered to his bunkmate. Look at this footage, and these humans track and kill creatures that could tear apart a Krek soldier in seconds. And they do it for recreation. His fellow trooper Mordok watched the documentary showing humans climbing vertical ice walls in sub-zero temperatures. Our medical files say that temperature would kill us in minutes. They're doing it voluntarily. They're choosing to put themselves in deadly situations. The footage spread through the Krek's military like a plague. Soldiers who had never questioned their superiority suddenly found themselves afraid to sleep. They dreamed of human warriors who laughed as they died, of creatures that had been forged by a world that tried to kill them every single day. Dr. Kothfer, the chief medical officer of the Krek's Third Fleet, filed his report with growing concern. High Command, we're seeing unprecedented psychological responses among our troops. Soldiers are reporting nightmares about human combat footage. Some are refusing to engage in operations where humans might be present. The condition spread quickly. Through the ranks, Krek soldiers began experiencing what their medical staff termed predator paralysis, the instinctive freeze response that prey animals felt when confronted by a superior hunter. It was something the Kreks had never experienced before, because they had always been the hunters. These aren't just warriors, reported intelligence officer Zethmer from the front lines. The humans are survivors of a planetary environment that actively tried to exterminate them. They don't just fight to win, they fight because fighting is what they are. Every human is a weapon that was forged by millions of years of survival on a world that showed no mercy. The psychological warfare had accomplished something that conventional weapons never could. It had planted fear in the hearts of soldiers, who had never known defeat. The Krek's Empire was beginning to understand that they weren't just fighting another species. They were fighting the children of a world that had turned survival into an art form. Communications Officer Yoonji watched the intelligence reports with satisfaction. The battle for Aquinas had been won with ships and weapons. But the war for the Krek's soul was being won with nothing more than the truth about what humanity really was. The moon of Kepler 7 had been a Krek stronghold for 3 years, surface covered with military installations and supply depots. The aliens had turned it into a fortress, confident that their advanced sensors and automated defenses made it impregnable. They had never considered that somewhere in the darkness, human eyes were watching their every move. Colonel Junho crouched in the shadows of a rocky outcrop, his black combat suit making him nearly invisible against the moonscape. Behind him, 12 of Earth's deadliest soldiers waited for a signal. They had been on this moon for 6 weeks, living in caves and abandoned mining tunnels, surviving on emergency rations and pure determination.
Oh, I remember.
Junho whispered into his throat microphone, "We're not here to win a battle. We're here to make them afraid to sleep." Every patrol that disappears, every base that gets hit, every shadow that moves wrong, it all adds up to one thing. They need to learn that nowhere is safe when Earth's children are hunting. Sergeant Minsayo checked her equipment one final time. She had been a police sniper before the war, skilled at taking precise shots in urban environments. She was about to become something much more dangerous. A ghost that killed from impossible distances and vanished without a trace. The first, Krek's patrol consisted of 6 soldiers making their routine sweep of the mining complex. They moved in perfect formation, their energy weapons held at ready, their sensors scanning for any sign of human activity. They never saw the danger that was already surrounding them. Junho's team had studied these patrols for weeks, learning their timing, their routes, their communication protocols. They knew that Trooper Viktal always lagged behind the group by 3 meters. They knew that the patrol leader, Sergeant Mordok, always checked his communicator at the 15-minute mark. They knew which soldier was nervous, which one was overconfident, and which one would panic first when things went wrong. The attack came from all directions at once. Silenced weapons fired from concealed positions, taking down 4 soldiers before they could even raise their rifles. The remaining 2 tried to call for help, but their communications had been jammed by equipment the humans had stolen from previous raids. When the rescue team arrived 20 minutes later, they found something that chilled them to their alien. Bones, the Krek soldiers were gone, but their equipment remained, arranged in a perfect circle around a small pile of stones. It looked ritualistic, primitive, like something from the dawn of civilization. "What kind of creatures are we fighting?" whispered the rescue team leader as he stared at the scene. "This isn't warfare. This is ... something else." But the psychological impact was just beginning. Security footage from Krek's bases began showing impossible things, supplies disappearing from locked warehouses. Guards found unconscious at their posts with no memory of what had happened, and most disturbing of all, evidence that humans had been living undetected in the bases for weeks, private. Kethver had been guarding the ammunition depot on Kepler 7 for 2 months. He was a good soldier, alert and conscientious, but when he reviewed the security recordings, he discovered something that made his blood run cold. There, in the corner of the storage room, was a small collection of human supplies, food containers, water purification tablets, and a sleeping bag that had been carefully hidden behind stacks of Krek's equipment. "They were here," he reported to his commanding officer, his voice shaking. "Humans were living in our base. They were watching us, studying us, learning our routines. They could have killed us at any time." The revelation spread through the Krek's military like wildfire. Soldiers began obsessively checking their quarters, their equipment, their food supplies. They started seeing threats in every shadow, jumping at sounds that might herald another human attack. The disciplined military machine that had conquered 47 star systems was slowly falling apart from paranoia and fear. Colonel Junho watched the chaos from his hidden observation post, a grim smile on his face. His teams were still out. There, still hunting, still making the Krek's empire understand that they had picked a fight with the wrong species. Every successful raid, every disappeared patrol, every piece of evidence that humans were living among them like deadly ghosts, it all served the same purpose. The Kreks had spent centuries being the hunters, the predators who struck fear into the hearts of peaceful species. Now they were learning what it felt like to be prey, to know that somewhere in the darkness, Earth's children were watching and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The Empire's troops began reporting nightmares about human soldiers who moved like shadows and struck like lightning. They talked about invisible enemies who could be anywhere, anytime, studying their weaknesses and preparing for the next attack. The psychological warfare had turned the entire Krek's military into a collection of nervous, adulterous, paranoid soldiers who feared their own shadows. Supreme Commander Vorthak stood in the command center of his flagship, the Annihilator, watching the blue jewel of the Villani homeworld grow larger on the main screen. His once mighty armada had been reduced to barely 300 ships, and the crews were jumpy, paranoid, and afraid of shadows. The human raids had turned his disciplined military into a collection of nervous wrecks who flinched at every sensor reading. "This ends today," Vorthak declared to his assembled officers. "We will crush the Villani homeworld, eliminate these human pests, and restore the Empire's reputation. I've brought every available warship for this final assault. Nothing can stop us now." His aide, a trembling creature whose nervous system had been shattered by months of human psychological warfare, consulted his tactical display. "Sir, we're detecting minimal human presence in the system. A few scattered vessels, probably merchant ships trying to evacuate civilians." Vorthak smiled for the first time in weeks. "Perfect. We'll destroy them as an example, then proceed with the planetary bombardment. The galaxy will remember that the Krex Empire cannot be defied." The massive fleet moved into the inner system with renewed confidence. For the first time since the war began, everything seemed to be going according to plan. The Villani homeworld hung before them like a ripe fruit, and the few human ships in the area appeared to be fleeing in panic. But Admiral Minho had been planning this moment for 6 months. As the Krex fleet reached the optimal bombardment position, space itself seemed to come alive. Asteroids that had been drifting peacefully suddenly fired their engines, revealing themselves as disguised human battleships. Gas clouds that had appeared natural on sensors erupted with missile fire as hidden human vessels emerged from there. Concealment. Even the planet's own moon seemed to sprout weapons as human forces revealed positions they had been preparing for months. "It's a trap," screamed the sensor operator, but his warning came too late. The Krex fleet found itself surrounded by human vessels that had been waiting in perfect ambush positions, their crews studying Krex tactics and preparing for this exact moment. Captain Huna's voice crackled across all frequencies from her position inside a hollowed-out asteroid. "Welcome to Earth's neighborhood, Krix. We've been waiting for you." The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic military history. Human ships fought with a creativity that bordered on insanity, adapting their tactics in real time. As the situation changed, when their long-range weapons were ineffective against Krex shields, they closed to ramming distance. When their fighters were outnumbered, they split into smaller groups and attacked from impossible angles. Lieutenant Commander Sora led a squadron of human fighters in a maneuver that no sane pilot would attempt. They dove directly into the engine wash of a Krex dreadnought, using the superheated plasma to mask their approach before emerging to deliver point-blank torpedo strikes to the ship's reactor core. "This is insane," shouted pilot Dong-Yun over the communication channel as his fighter performed a barrel roll between 2 Krex destroyers. "I love it." The humans fought like creatures that had evolved on a world where every day was a struggle for survival. They improvised, adapted, and overcame obstacles that would have stopped any civilized military. When their ships were damaged, they used them as guided missiles. When their weapons failed, they rammed their enemies with whatever was available. Vorthak watched his tactical display with growing horror as ship after ship disappeared from his fleet. The humans weren't just fighting to win, they were fighting to prove a point. Every destroyed Krex vessel was a message to the galaxy that Earth's children could not be intimidated, conquered, or destroyed. The battle raged for 3 days. Human reinforcements arrived from hidden bases throughout the system, while Krex forces found themselves trapped in a killing field with no escape route. The humans had turned the entire solar system into a maze of weapons, mines, and ambush positions. On the 3rd day, with half his fleet destroyed and the survivors traumatized beyond recovery, Vorthak finally accepted the impossible truth. The Krex Empire, conqueror of 47 star systems, had been defeated by a species that refused to acknowledge the concept of impossible odds. "Signal surrender," he whispered to his communications officer. "Tell them we yield." The response came from Admiral Minho himself, speaking from the bridge of his flagship. "Surrender accepted. But understand this. The Krex Empire's reign of terror is over. You picked a fight with the wrong species, and now you'll face the consequences." As the shattered remnants of the Krex fleet limped away from the Villani homeworld, word spread throughout the galaxy. Earth's children had proven that technological superiority meant nothing. Against the fury of a species that had been forged by a world that showed no mercy, the empire that had ruled through fear now knew what it meant to be afraid. The surrender of the Krex Empire sent shockwaves through every corner of the galaxy. On trade stations and colony worlds, beings who had lived in fear for generations suddenly found themselves whispering a new name with something approaching reverence. Humanity, the species from the Deathworld, had done the impossible. They had broken the empire that no one believed could be defeated. Ambassador Taeyun stood in the Grand Assembly Hall of the Villani homeworld, surrounded by representatives from dozens of species. Some had traveled from the far reaches of the galaxy just to see the aliens who had saved them all. Others had come seeking protection from threats they had never dared to challenge before. The elegant crystal chamber buzzed with excited conversation in 100 different languages. "The Krex Empire has formally surrendered," Taeyun announced, his voice carrying clearly through the hall's translation systems. "Their military has been disbanded, their weapons confiscated, and their leadership will face trial for crimes against peaceful civilizations. But this is just the beginning." Elder Siphon of the Villani floated near the center of the assembly, his tentacles moving. And what humans had learned was a gesture of deep gratitude. "Ambassador Taeyun, your species has given us back our future. Our children will grow up in a galaxy where the strong cannot simply devour the weak. How can we ever repay such a gift?" Taeyun smiled, remembering the first time he had met the gentle Villani leader. "You don't need to repay anything. You asked for help and we answered. That's what civilized beings do for each other." The real work was just beginning. Over the following months, human diplomats worked with representatives from across the galaxy to establish something unprecedented. A set of universal laws that would protect peaceful species from aggressive empires. They called it the Terra Accords, named after the Latin word for Earth. The negotiations were complex, involving species with radically different cultures, biology, and concepts of justice. But the humans had an advantage that no previous galactic power had possessed. They weren't trying to conquer or control anyone. They simply wanted to ensure that what had happened to the Villani could never happen again. Captain Huna found herself assigned to the newly formed Galactic Protection Force, a military organization jointly funded by dozens of species, but led by human officers. Her ship, the UES Guardian, patrolled the Outer Rim territories where aggressive species still posed threats to peaceful colonies. Contact on sensors reported her tactical officer during a routine patrol to raider fleet. Moving toward the Zilani trade convoy, Huna's smile was sharp as a blade. "Signal the raiders. Tell them they have 30 seconds to change course before we demonstrate why picking on peaceful species is a very bad idea." The raiders, having heard the stories about human fury, immediately altered their heading and fled toward the Outer Rim. Word had spread quickly through the galaxy's criminal networks. Robbing peaceful traders was no longer a profitable occupation when Earth's children were watching. Meanwhile, Mon-Earth Admiral Minho prepared for the most important speech of his career. The Grand Assembly Hall had been built specifically for this moment, with seating for representatives from every known species in the galaxy. The message would be broadcast to billions of beings across thousands of worlds. "My fellow beings," Admiral Minho began, his weathered face showing the strain of the past year's conflicts. "Earth didn't seek the responsibility of galactic leadership. We were content to explore the stars, make new friends, and learn from other civilizations. But when we received the Villani distress call, we realized that our comfortable isolation was a luxury we could no longer afford." The alien representatives listened in respectful silence as the human admiral continued. "We have seen what happens when the strong prey upon the weak without consequences. We have witnessed the fear that grips entire civilizations when they believe no one will help them. This ends now." Admiral Minho's voice grew stronger, carrying the weight of Earth's determination. "Any species that preys on the defenseless will face the same fury that forged us. We are the children of a world that tried to kill us every day, and we survived by protecting each other. Now we extend that protection to all who need it." The assembly erupted in a cacophony of sounds, cheers, songs, harmonic vibrations, and expressions of joy in languages that had no human equivalent. For the first time in galactic history, the weak had protectors who were stronger than their predators. The galaxy had learned something profound that day. The most dangerous predators were not those who consumed the innocent, but those who chose to stand between the hunters and their prey. Earth's children had taken on the role of galactic guardians, and the universe would never be the same.